Well, it's July, so we're going to move on to a new topic, and this month we're going to be doing a series on world religions, and that's something I like to do every few years because I think many people, including me, were attracted to unity because we draw on diverse sources in support of that positive message that we send out into the world. I know some people call it an interfaith approach, which is essentially correct because on many occasions our Unity co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore made it clear that they were in fact drawing on many different schools of thought, both religious and secular. I like to say that Charles, he kind of wanted to both have his cake and eat it too. He wanted to include religion, the positive aspects of it, but he also wanted to go beyond religion to encompass philosophy and the scientific method and things like that. And back in his days, in the late 1800s, science and religion were still very much at odds. I mean, I think they still are today in many ways, but very much at odds with Christians in this country fighting. The big boogeyman back then was the theory of evolution, which they were fighting with everything they had. And then there are some groups today who are still fighting the idea of evolution. I think those groups are a distinct minority, but the interesting thing is that they tend to make a lot of noise, and so they get more attention than I think they deserve. So our topic today is contemporary Christianity, and I want to focus on the positive developments that are out there, despite the rise that we've seen in Christian nationalist groups and their very warped definition of religious freedom. I think those people are basically dinosaurs, kind of like these guys up here. One says to the other, "I don't care what they say, I just don't believe in asteroids." And we all know what happened next. Ignoring facts and evidence. And then, lo and behold, you fade away because of factors beyond your control. And often it's simply because we refuse to evolve. And the universe has a very important positive message that we ignore at our own peril. The universe says, evolve or die. That's basically the way it works. So in contrast to that, and a very positive contrast, I think, is an organization that I've been following for almost 20 years now. It's called Positive Christianity. Here's their website. And I've been aware of their work for a long time because they were supporting the work of people like Bishop John Shelby Spong, Marcus Borg, John Dominic Crossan. I've used their books all the time as source material here. They're among the leading scholars coming to us from more traditional Christianity who are advancing this message saying, stop treating Jesus and the Bible as idols to be worshipped. Their position is that the Bible shouldn't be taken literally, Jesus was not exclusively divine, and that the life and teachings of Jesus are valuable examples of what it means to live ethically and how to find meaning and purpose in life. Now, that's a message that can cut across all religious boundaries instead of being exclusive and exclusionary. So, if you go to that website I just showed you, positivechristianity.org, you'll find what they call the 8 points of positive Christianity. And I'm always impressed when I find an organization like this one that can distill their essential teachings down to something that'll fit on the front of a t-shirt in a font that I can still read, all right? That's saying something. So I want to share these 8 points with you this morning because first of all, they really speak to me personally. And secondly, because in my opinion, I think this is what Christianity is going to increasingly look like in the years to come. So, they start out the 8 points like this. They say, by calling ourselves progressive Christians, we mean we are Christians who, and then number 1, believe that following the path and teachings of Jesus can lead to an awareness and experience of the sacred and the oneness and unity of all life. affirm that the teachings of Jesus provide but one of many ways to experience the sacredness and oneness of life, and that we can draw from diverse sources of wisdom in our spiritual journey. So consider what these first 2 points are not saying. They're not saying that you must believe in Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, that He was born of a virgin, rose from the dead, is going to come back and judge everyone. It's all about action and personal experience. That's what it's brought down to. And the other amazing thing here is that they come right out and invite people to study other wisdom traditions, other teachers. It's open-ended, and it basically invites everyone into a dialogue and this idea of a shared exploration. It's impressive. Point number 3, I think. There it is. Point number 3, seek community that is inclusive of all people, including, but not limited to, conventional Christians and questioning skeptics, believers and agnostics, women and men, those of all sexual orientations and gender identities, those of all classes and abilities. In other words, they refuse to marginalize anyone, right? Ask yourself the question, who would Jesus marginalize? Nobody. They refuse to marginalize anyone, including those they disagree with. That's what I get from this, including those they disagree with. I recall, this was a few years ago now, happened in Phoenix, Arizona. There was a group of local Christian ministers who got together and decided that they needed to go on the attack against progressive Christianity, this organization. They needed to attack the ideas and try to marginalize progressive Christianity. They put up these huge banners. There were 4 churches that got together. They put up these huge banners in front of their church. This one here says progressive with progressive in quotes, air quotes. Fact or fiction? And then the next slide here shows you the collection of the other 3. And the idea was that they were going to take a particular Sunday and they were going to preach sermons about how progressive Christianity isn't Bible-based and it's not really Christian. And they wanted to make this into a national operation, a national movement in other Christian churches around the country. Now, I'm not sure how all that turned out, but what's really interesting is the way that progressive Christianity responded. Remember I said they refuse to marginalize anyone, even those they disagree with? So here's what they did. This was their response. They said, so, what are they worried about? What new facts are they going to share? Why do they find this necessary? It appears to us we must be doing a pretty good job. What do you think? We think they may be introducing a whole lot of new people to our movement. So we say, thank you. I would imagine they probably felt something like our next friend up here, the trash panda, otherwise known as a raccoon, who's saying, excellent, you fell into my trap, right? A cleverly designed trap. I mean, are those ministers in Phoenix nuts? You couldn't pay for the kind of publicity that they gave to progressive Christianity. Progressive Christianity couldn't have come up with a better plan to get their message out there, and these people are doing it for them and paying for it. I mean, it was a well-designed trap in some ways. All right, on to point number 4. Know that the way we behave towards one another is the fullest expression of what we believe. Actions speak louder than words. Follow the golden rule. Substance over form. That kind of thing. Point number 5. Find grace in the search for understanding and believe there is more value in questioning than in absolutes. Wow. And this is the only spot in these 8 points where they use any kind of technical Christian language, jargon as we sometimes call it, that word grace, which I think they're trying to redefine. But in traditional Christianity, grace is something that is freely given to those who profess belief in the divinity of Jesus. You have to believe in order to receive it, and you really don't deserve it anyway. That's the other core foundational part of that thing. Grace comes to you freely. You don't deserve it because you're born of Adam and Eve, you're a worthless sinner, so on and so forth. But anyway, they're redefining it. What they're saying here is that anything that we might call grace comes from the search for understanding. It comes from asking questions instead of blind belief, which is a complete flip, a complete reversal of the traditional understanding of grace. You might understand why some of the more traditional Christian ministers were a little bit upset by this, but do they have a better idea? That's exactly what their response was. What, you have better ideas? Okay. Number 6. Strive for peace and justice among all people. Not much comment needed there, right? That speaks for itself. Number 7. Strive to protect and restore the integrity of our earth. Now that's another major shift, because for the longest time, traditional Christianity took a very literal approach to the Bible when it talked about the places in the Bible where it talks about exercising dominion and control. Adam was given dominion and control over all of the earth and its creatures. So the attitude that came from all of that, a literal interpretation of those kinds of statements, is that the Bible says it's okay to pollute, strip mine, bring about the extinction of entire species. Because, well, hey, Jesus was coming again real soon anyway, so it really doesn't matter what we do to the planet, right? This is all temporary, and Jesus is coming, and so on and so forth. And this one is interesting for another reason. Even the more conservative churches are starting to get behind the idea that what the Bible really wants is something called stewardship. We're supposed to be taking care of the planet instead of exploiting it. So the idea that even the more traditional churches are starting to catch on to this point, I think is a positive development. It's a great development that they deserve credit for. Okay, finally, point number 8. Commit to a path of lifelong learning, compassion, and selfless love. Not much comment needed there either. And I have to confess, though, when I first read these 8 points years ago, I wanted to call 911 and report a theft. Because there isn't a single thing here that Unity hasn't been saying for a lot longer. Our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, had originally set out to change Christianity back in the 1800s, only instead of calling it progressive Christianity, they chose the term practical Christianity. Progressive, practical, basically the same thing, and this isn't a contest. This isn't a rivalry, okay? I prefer to think of it as a partnership. Unity is going to reach one group of people with our message, with our spin on this. Progressive Christianity is going to reach a whole different group of people. And what happens is, together we reach more people than we would be able to do alone. So, I call it a win-win proposition, and I think we should be cheering them on in their efforts. One of the things we're going to be learning in the weeks ahead as we study world religions is that there are things in all of the religions of the world that are what we might call toxic. Teachings that advocate discrimination, oppression, violence against non-believers. Sometimes we tend to give Buddhism a pass, believing that there's nothing toxic in the different Buddhist-dominated countries. But even Buddhism is having its problems. and has in the past. For those of you who don't know what's going on in Myanmar, there's some very serious Buddhist on Muslim discrimination going on, downright oppression and murder in many cases. And also what happened in Japan during World War II, where the Buddhist leaders there, mostly from Zen schools, I'm ashamed to say, supported and tacitly condoned what the government was doing in China and different places during World War II. So they don't get off scot-free either. And what we need, I think, is we got to have a detox program for world religions, right? The problem, though, when it comes to detox is that you can't force people into detox and expect to get good long-term results. I think that's just the way it is, right? It works best when it's voluntary, and that's the biggest challenge here, because the extremists in any religious group, they really don't want to listen to anyone outside their own group. Change has to come from within the group, and it's dangerous for members of a religion to stand up to their own extremists. It's dangerous, it's hazardous to your health. I think what we're seeing with the progressive Christianity movement is this attempt to stand up to the extremists. And I have to commend them for their courage and their intellectual honesty and integrity. We've put the 8 points of progressive Christianity in the handout in your bulletin. This is something maybe you can take home and perhaps use as a way to counteract some of the more toxic religious messages going on out there. The good news that we can start to share is that the moral majority is going extinct, and something much better is going to take its place. There's reason to be optimistic. See you next week.